So thanks, Bruce, for getting us started. All right, well, welcome everybody to SoFo. It's good to be back again, just a few of us here on site, but welcome to you at home. We're glad that you're with us this morning. I wanted to start off today with just some nuts and bolts because there's a lot of variables coming up in the next couple of weeks that we want to kind of attend to and sort of how we're going to kind of navigate that. The first one is next weekend is Labor Day weekend, right? So it's a holiday weekend. I'm happy coming and doing this on Labor Day, but if you're like, oh yeah, we're all traveling, anybody got a sense of that?
Probably traveling.
Probably traveling. She doesn't. You don't know. I may decide to pull off not doing it next weekend just because of that holiday weekend. It might be kind of shy. What do you think, Lori?
Go ahead, make a choice, right?
Okay.
We'll take a break.
All right, so we'll take a break. So we will not meet next weekend. The following weekend on the 10th, we're going to have a potluck in the evening here on site. So we were going to do it at our house, but it's such a construction mess that I decided we're going to do it down in the kitchen here. So we'll,
Construction?
Yeah, we're redoing our kitchen, so it's a mess right now. So we'll meet here, I'll announce that. And so you're all invited to come to the potluck, obviously, whether you're with us in person or online. But the one thing I want to do, we're going to talk about kind of the future of Soul Forum as I get ready to retire a little bit and what we might be able to do to put to influence the decision of the larger congregation about the whole Soul Forum experience. And I'm going to use today, what was it? It was the, I can't remember now. I've been gone too long. But I think we have the power to help the congregation think more critically about what it wants to do with Soul Forum. And maybe, that's what it was. I got an email this last week from someone who's been participating in Creekside Commons who kind of got the feel that maybe that was not something that was going to be perpetuated here in the future. And she wrote this beautiful email about how powerful it's been for her. It's Kathy Geyer did that. And so I think we have a voice to say, here's why we find this meaningful if you decide to keep it moving forward by staffing it. And what effect does it have in the community or on us? So I want to kind of explore that a little bit today. I mean, on the 10th. And to do that, I'm going to send out a video of a kind of a talk I gave about what is the value of Creekside Commons anyway for religious institutions that I recorded before I left for Vermont. So you're going to get a video, and then maybe some questions, and then we'll have dinner together and talk about all that, blah, 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 on the 10th. Make sense? Okay, that's good. All right, so today I was inspired by the book that Gwen wrote. I don't know if you bought that book yet, but Gwen wrote a little book and worked alongside of April to write that book, and it's been for sale through Amazon, so it's really easy to get. It's a little short, like, biographical piece of her kind of life journey. And it's very moving and touching, and Gwen's willing to come in September and talk about the book a little bit. But one of the things that I noticed in the book that was a bit humbling, in my opinion, and I think it's sort of the subject matter I want to at least open up today for discussion, was sort of how spirituality is something that's kind of out of our control. While we want to control it by kind of coming up with a strategy about our spiritual life through joining an organization or picking up on one sort of perspective and kind of working that perspective. For her in her life journey, it's almost like the magical moments that you just don't see coming that have a greater effect on what your spiritual or soul's, structure looks like. It's like you're not really in charge of kind of building this arc of your own spiritual path. It's just a ongoing response to these gracious moments or these surprise moments or these unpredictable moments. And her book is sort of like that, right? She's constantly moving into these cycles of experience and reflection just based on life circumstances that sort of come your way. And it hit me as I was reading the book, and we'll talk to her about it, but if you think about it, we talk a lot about, in this group, about the things that we do to build more depth of soul in our everyday lives. We either take a class, or we get into a spiritual practice. We do all these things to kind of build our own little paradise or our worldview. But really, I think there should be a component to the spiritual life that's just, how are you open to the surprises that come your way, right? How do you build a spiritual path that actually has a lot of open doors ready for whatever happens in a day or in a lifetime? And to expect that that's integrated into your strategy. It's not like you don't even have to worry about them, right? Because they're just going to show up on your radar screen. You don't know what they are. Like what you just got, the big surprise you just got this last week. Who saw that coming, right? How do we get ready for who saw that coming, and allow it to shape our lives? And the other piece I think that's so beautiful about it is that, like organized religion, when it gets when it tries too hard to control its construct, it becomes irrelevant over time, right? It's not actually keeping up with the evolution of culture or time or place. It loses connection to that. But if you've got this kind of open spontaneity option inside of your spirituality, then it's always feeling more relevant and connected to the now, because you don't know what's going to happen in the next couple seconds from now, right? So how do you just be open to that changing your course? So that's what I was thinking about this week. And so two pieces of poetry. The first one is another one by Billy Collins, and this one's called "Searching." And it's just a snippet of one of his pieces of poetry that kind of reminds you that while you might be intentional about all of this, there's also a reminder that sometimes it's the unintended that is the most powerful thing. The thing that you weren't actually planning that becomes the most powerful thing. And I'm going to do that little piece of poetry, then I'm going to share a little experience I had about that, and then a very quick little haiku, and then some of your thoughts, and then we'll get into conversation. Okay? Sounds like a plan? And before I do that, I want to go back to my earlier comments about nuts and bolts. Allison's been very active in the community about the housing situation. This is a perfect example about how we have influence, Allison, this little group.
Tomorrow night.
Huh?
Big city council meeting tomorrow night.
Oh, yes. I wondered if I'd missed it or not. But Allison's been pushing me into an awareness about those situations by just some conversations as we've been going along. And then lo and behold, our church has been thinking about, well, you know, what are our options in this whole issue of housing? And then Allison brought this proposal of what the city's considering to our congregation via some conversations. The council wrestled over that, not only approved it, but wrote a big letter of support to the city for this meeting that's coming up tomorrow night. Is that what you said? And so it's just one reminder about how we have a voice inside kind of organized religious life. And thanks to Allison, that got all the way through our council and was signed off by the president and the vice president and myself in support of this big move. So we do have an effect on the organization, as small as we are here in Soul Forum. So thank you, Allison, for that. All right, this is a little poem called "Searching," and what I love about this is the way in which the unintended becomes the focus. I recall once someone admitting that all that they remembered of Anna Karenina was something about a picnic basket. And now, after consuming a book devoted to the subject of Barcelona, its people, its history, its complex architecture, all I remember is the mention of some albino gorilla in an inhabitant of the park where the citadel of the Bourbons once stood. And then he goes on and on to describe this gorilla. And when I read this poem, I thought, isn't that the case so often, that we enter in with some intentionality, thinking that we're going to be able to capture the essence of something, but it's some side piece that ultimately captures our imagination. And just the beauty of that, right? I read this big book about Barcelona, and all I can remember is an albino gorilla. That becomes my focus. Or I read Anna Karenina, and all I can remember is the picnic basket. And if you think about your life, so often it's those little snippets of nothingness that capture our imagination. And what's the beauty buried in the snippets of nothingness for you? And to cherish them and realize that maybe they're the thing that matters the most, right? Because they stick, they have some sticking power that the big issues don't always carry. And so we walk in with such robust and grand plans, and we walk out with a remembrance of a picnic basket or an albino gorilla. And that's our life. That's how we make meaning in life. What irony it is, I think. One of my recollections of that was, and Lori knows this story well, is how the unexpected can kind of change your life trajectory. And one of my passions in life, and maybe you share it too, is I love summer vacations and just the getaway break of it all, right? The ability to just get away from all the routines and kind of fall into this space where you can take care of yourself for a week, read a book on the beach, swim in the water, go for a walk, all that kind of disconnection that you get with real recreation time. And I'm a planner, so I love to plan recreation time for our family and design it. But over time, as the kids began to leave the house, it was just Lori and I who would go on vacation together, and we started off doing that and doing our little trips and having our recreation time. But then the grandkids came along, and all of a sudden, the time we could allocate for vacation started to become family time. And every time we would go on vacation together, on the flight home, I would begin my complaining mantra about how this was not really vacation. And, basically it was babysitting. And we would go, and you're stuck watching kids and doing it. You're just exhausted from all that heavy lifting, right? And I would whine and complain all the way home on the airplane about how that really wasn't what we really need is a vacation. And I wanted my vacations back. I was so selfish. And so, but what happened over the course of time, and I did not plan this or see this coming, but every time we would go back there and we would have to do these different kinds of holidays, I would get more used to them, right? And then I began to enjoy them. And now I'm obsessed with them, right? That I could go and spend a week just hanging out with their family is my holiday. I did not see that coming, right? That was like planning a recreative week that I need in my life and having the obsession of your grandchildren change your course of behavior. That was not my plan. And now Lori knows it's like, I love those weeks, right? They're exhausting, and I absolutely find them refreshing in some weird way. That's me reading Anna Karenina and being obsessed now with the picnic basket, right? We all have that in our lives. And so one of the things I want to chat about today a little bit in discussion is, A, does that happen for you? And B, do you find that you're able to kind of shift your focus to allow those to carry sort of life's meaning? Or are you sort of dismissive of them? When those could be holding the very character of who you really are, the stuff that matters most to you, hidden in an albino gorilla or a picnic basket. What are your albino gorillas? What are your picnic baskets? And are you open in your spiritual life to kind of being ready for those surprises along the way? I think that's a good strategy. It's not always our strategy because we're such control freaks, but I think it's a possible strategy. So, to close out, I'm going to read a haiku, and I was going to write this on the board because it's such a great haiku, but I think you're going to remember it. This is a haiku by Soshi. He's a Buddhist poet. And Soshi is one of the lesser known of the Buddhist poets, partly because he chose a methodology in his haiku around Buddhist teachings that was different than all the other major poets of the time. And one of his strategies was to write all these poems about stuff that just didn't matter. So if you look at his poetry, it's about like ants and grasshoppers and worms and the stuff that you just don't pay attention to. And his body of work is consumed by the stuff that you don't look at. And yet it holds the wonder of this sort of Buddhist mentality he's trying to get across. So if you're ever interested in kind of, I think, the spirit of what we're talking about, his haiku tends to do that, right? That he sees in something that you don't normally look at, that which is. And I think there's some potential there in our spiritual lives. It also helps you kind of not get so serious about it, or so, what would we call it, like controlling or obsessive about it. It's more of like a waiting, wondering game. Let's see what comes of today, and let that be my spiritual moment. I mean, that's much more interesting in some ways than I'm going to do this today and see if I can craft my spiritual life. It's got a different feel to it. And I sort of like it. It's got a cool vibe to it. So I'm going to read it through once. I'm going to read it through the second time. I'm going to ring the bell, and then I'm going to read it through a third time, because haikus, as you know, are super short. And they almost are like magical in what they can accomplish in such a short period of time. Almost like suddenly seeing an albino gorilla. This is by Soshi. Walking the dog, you meet lots of dogs. Walking the dog, you meet lots of dogs. Billy Collins writes, "It is a perfect little poem. Whether you poke your nose into Plato or get serious with St. John of the Cross, you will not find a more unassailable truth or a sweeter one than this. Walking the dog, you meet lots of dogs." All right. Isn't that a sweet little piece of poetry? I'm curious what you think about either the poetry or just the theme in general as the sun continues to shine in my face here. So let's leave it. We'll leave the open feed going and use the microphone. Any thoughts on walking the dog? You meet lots of dogs, or just this general theme about how you navigate the surprises that come your way, and what do you do when they come up? Do you ignore them? Do they become something that you just don't want to pay attention to because you're so focused on all the major stuff you're working on? How do you navigate the surprise factor of the spiritual life, which, if you do get a chance to read Gwen's book, is really a lot of what's going on in there. I'll open it up. You have a thought of course you do, April.
Well, so this is what for me, it's like, the best stories are about the little things.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, even my friend Rumi wrote a book, I Want to Remember This, the tiny moments that make up a life. And they're just these little tiny snippets of things that happened in her life.
Yeah.
And the stories that people have shared with me, or the stories that I've told myself, are all these little snapshots in time. And so, anyway, everything you're talking about, I'm like, oh yeah, we're always I'm always so focused on, that big, whatever the goal is.
Yeah.
Whatever mountain I'm climbing.
Correct.
And, just like as you were talking and I was looking out the window and just, relaxed in the poem, and I'm like, oh yeah, this is where life is.
Mm-hmm.
As opposed to, because I accomplished the things and I'm like, well, I did that, yay me.
Yeah, exactly.
But it doesn't necessarily have that.
Why do you think we're wired that? I mean, why is it that it is? The real essence sometimes of your life is those little. They're like very thin moments that tend to collect and yet secretly hold what is most valuable to you. It's bizarre.
Well, so then the other thing that really jumped out for me is, like J.D. Salinger calls it, the tender, meaningful gesture. Mm. So, you can be reading a story or whatever, and it's that, or in life, like somebody does like the littlest thing.
Yeah.
And it's so moving.
Right.
So like, and so then there's that, and then there's like, oh, I need to make all these accomplishments.
Yeah. Well, that's great. All right, who else got a little comment or thought on this one? Lori?
Thank you. Oh, thank you. This is a good topic because I'm a teacher, as most of you know, and so it's the beginning of the school year, which is the time when I'm like, I'm gonna get all my good habits in place, and so I've been really focused on what are the structures of my mornings gonna be, and how am I gonna, I was sharing with Dan the other day some new things I was gonna try, and at the same time, I guess I think there's a yes and. Mm-hmm. Like, I think there's a place for, and maybe
you do have to walk the dog, right? So that's the point of this thing, right?
There you go. Yeah, so you gotta walk the dog and, like, oh, look what happened.
Yes.
There's dogs here, or whatever. And so that's one thing I'm thinking about is, I think it's a yes and, Mm-hmm. And maybe it's all about, don't be so rigid that I am walking the dog that you miss the things, right? Or and there's something about that's about being in the present moment. Mm-hmm. And I wonder if that's what makes that thin place of experience, like, maybe it's because I was present when I noticed that bird out there.
Oh.
And so is that part of the power of it?
Yeah. It calls you into presence, sort of, because you're so, it pulls you.
And you're open to it, or something happens that really makes you present. And maybe that's even what happens in the hard times, is you can't help but be present. Although you can get all weird about that. Anyway, so those were my two noticings.
No, those are really good ones. Yeah, Julie. I do like the presence thing, because I'm wondering, I'm like, what is it about those little thin moments that create their energy, right? And it could be that you're walking the dog, and then you're drawn into that surprise moment in a different way that pulls you out of routine or focus or intent or willpower or your strength area, and you're like, oh, what's this, doing here? And that draws you into more of a present state. It's possible that could be what it is. Julie?
The more you think about the poem, the haiku that you wrote, that you read,
Yeah.
it just gets so much more. It just keeps on. It just kind of explodes. Because I'm thinking when we had our dog,
Yes.
and every day, of course, you're going out a couple times a day, walking the dog in the morning, in the evening, and you'd see things alongside, on the sidewalk. People have boxes of items, and you're like, what's in there? And you stop, and then all of a sudden you're carrying like a load. You got the dog, you got the load, and all of a sudden you arrive at your house and you have more things. And I also think that as you're walking the dog, you're hearing other dogs either they're coming by and they're greeting each other, and you stop and you're talking to the other people, so those opportunities are arriving to you. And then you hear the dogs who are like barking, just sound like angrily, but maybe they just want out to come and see. And they're barking from their houses. And so there's that kind of thing. And I just remember this one time from down the street, I hear this dog just barking, just coming up and running up, and he doesn't have an owner. It's this little Chihuahua, and we had this huge dog. But it's like, okay, we're just gonna stand here. And he arrives, and then he's like, hey, just wanted to say hi. So you got to be open to, this. You'll be surprised at what will be along the side of the way and what will come and greet you. So it's interesting.
No, that's beautiful. Right, and my guess is when that happens, there's some fear factor, right? When the other dogs are coming, I fear oftentimes you're going to ruin this dog walk I'm on, right? Metaphorically, and that tangible fear when you're walking Aslan, right? And here comes this Chihuahua, and you're like, what the hell is going to happen now? That fear factor, I think, also is this: you're very alert, and that moment just lights up for you, and then all of a sudden it resolves in a way you didn't expect. All of that is magical stuff, I think.
And also with a dog, sometimes your companion, whatever that might be, listen to that too, because Aslan was never, there was ever a problem. Always relaxed, always calm, just ready to receive whatever.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great one for you guys. Too bad you're gonna have to tell Bruce this one. He's not here, but yeah, tell him. Hey, Bruce, walking the dog. You meet lots of dogs. It's such a great little haiku, right? That's just like what you said. It's got so many layers to it. Anybody else? Allison, Tina, Alan, thoughts, reflections? Yeah.
I thought it was a fabulous haiku and thought-provoking in many directions.
Yes.
And I decided for once to try to not overanalyze it.
Well, that's nice, Alan. That's a good spiritual practice for you. Yeah, I will not overanalyze this piece of poetry. That is great. That's like a step in the right direction for you, as given your career path and everything. Tina, you got the mic. Do you want to say anything? Does anything about that one strike you, or you just had an experience that caught you off guard, right? That was unexpected. Was there moments in that experience that kind of were like these small, oh my?
Well, so I was back in Ohio visiting my mom and got a call from my ex-husband. He had gotten a 3 calls on his work phone, and he's retired, so he never checks it. And apparently, people were trying to get in touch with me because my brother died. So I happened to be in Ohio when I get these calls from a mortuary, funeral home, hospital. So he's an estranged brother who I hadn't seen in 35 years. Nobody'd seen him. So it was actually very fortuitous that I was in Ohio at the time, able to deal with this. And so while that was going on, I had a lot of reflections on this person I didn't know, who I hadn't seen in 35 years, and then start thinking about his life, which I hadn't thought about him in a long time. I didn't know if he was dead or alive. Well, he's now dead. But for all that time, I didn't know where he was. Nobody did. So I feel like actually a little bit closer to him now because I'm talking to the one friend he had. I'm learning about him. I'm like connecting with him, like, you know, what do we do with his what do you want done with your ashes? Like,
Yeah,
what do
yeah.
we do? Do you want a service? Like, you know, I'm having this kind of conversation with a dead person. Yeah, it's very full of reflection and yeah.
Yeah,
And
I
there's
get
lots
it.
of reflections in there.
Yeah, and it's just a beautiful. I'm going to use this example in the next service, but there are these moments like that you just can't control, that just continue to carry. Maybe I don't know if they're the truths you're looking for, but it is the kind of the magical way in which life continues to show up for you, that you can either absorb and integrate or let go of. But there are opportunities that you're not in charge of. You know, that's what's so beautiful about them. I'll give you the one quick story, and then we'll call it quits. We have 3 grandkids, and they're all different heights because they're all different ages. So the oldest one is obviously the tallest one, and then the middle up, and then we got the little kid who, you know, is always fighting for space and wanting to be like everybody else, right? So we did the most dangerous thing you can do with these 3 kids. We went to Six Flags resort, and in Six Flags there's a vetting process based on height, whether you can go on the ride or not. And luckily, to the credit of Six Flags, this little kid could get on every ride that the tallest kid could get on. It was magical, right? So we all got on these big rides, and everybody was thrilled to death. That was how we started off our holiday with the grandkids. I ended the holiday with the grandkids going to the county fair in Essex in Vermont the last night. And it's got all these rides again, right? So here we go. It's pouring rain in Vermont. Nobody in Vermont cares whether it's pouring rain. They're all getting on the rides. We get to the first ride, and everybody can get on. It's no big deal. But as we started moving deeper into the rides, we realized that the youngest couldn't get on, couldn't participate, but the other 2 were clear. So I'd say, you guys could go on this, but Ellis, you can't. And you could tell that the brothers wanted to go on the rides, but they felt bad that the littlest one couldn't go on the ride, right? So the whole night was sort of negotiating which rides we could go on. And the one ride that we could all go on was this very slow roller coaster of a tiny child's caterpillar. It was a caterpillar roller coaster that was, a couple little. I had to get in this thing, and I had to cram myself in it like a freaking astronaut. And I'm huge inside of this caterpillar. Right? We're in the front seat, right? And Alice is next to me. Those 3 boys just had the greatest time. They wanted to go over and over again because they could all be together on that little ride. Stupid ride, right? They laughed the whole time. By the end, the last ride of the night, the oldest one really wanted to go on this one final ride, right? And they couldn't go on. I finally convinced him, you could go on one by yourself and we'll all wait for you. So he decided that he would finish off the night going on this ride. He gets on the ride, we watch him stand in line, gets on the ride. It's a more aggressive ride, right? And he comes off the ride totally dizzy, beside himself, and like, oh my God, thank God you guys didn't go on this ride. It's so dizzy, he's sort of mildly nauseous. He's coming off the ride, and they all decide, let's go back to the caterpillar ride, and we finish up the night on the caterpillar. And I thought, I got to pay more attention to these little moments, right? Because I was just trying to walk the dog at the amusement park, keeping 3 young boys, in check through a crazy nighttime amusement park in the rain, and they were watching out for each other. Doggone it, if walking the dog, you don't meet other dogs along the way. It's just a beautiful reminder of overanalyzing a piece of haiku. But also, could you imagine if your entire spiritual life was informed by that haiku? Yeah. I mean, I think it would make a difference. I'm going to live with it this week and see, and I invite you guys to do the same, y'all to do the same thing, right?
Could you repeat it?
Yes. I will, and I'll send it out. But you should have it memorized by now, Alan.
There's something about hearing it.
Yeah, it is. Well, and let me use Billy Collins, and then I'll go to it. Here's how we'll end. Whether you poke your nose into Play-Doh Great. Or get serious about St. John of the Cross. You will never find a more unassailable truth or a sweeter one than this poem by Soshi. Walking the dog, period. You meet lots of dogs. All right. Beautiful piece. Oh my God, I can't believe I stumbled into that one. All right, thanks everybody. We're taking a break next week. Then we'll send you an email communication about what we're going to do on the 10th, which will be a big potluck and conversation, and a link to a video I did about what is the value of doing Soul Forum anyway and Creekside Commons. We want your opinion on that, and then hopefully we'll find a way to articulate that opinion and share it with the congregation as they're going through this sort of transition process to decide what the future of OSLC looks like.
So is the 10th also not happening in the morning?
Correct. It won't happen in the morning. Our time will be in the evening. So we basically get 2 weeks, one a break, and then one it happens on a Sunday evening. With wine, I mean, we should have cocktails, wine, the whole nine, frivolity, but also some really healthy and hearty discussion about, food and that kind of thing. I think it'll be lovely. All right, all. That's it.